Welcome to r/MaliciousCompliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. The first story. National Guard unit tried to F me over on a promotion. I quit and retired anyway. The second story. Tech support troubleshoots corporate syncing app. Senior rep insists on exchanging device. Customer advised to check server settings. Senior rep's incompetence leads determination. The third story. Player complains about not getting free hits. Umpire complies. Player's team loses semi-final. The first story is, make me take PT every month, will you? I was in the US Army and the Army National Guard for over 20 years. I did finally get my pension, but I was ready to throw all that time away because of the inability of a first lieutenant to count to 8. We had an annual APFT scheduled as part of a drill weekend. A drill weekend consisted of 4 unit training assemblies, or UTAs. Each UTA was equivalent to a day of active duty pay. The duty day started at 7 a.m., lunch at 12, final formation at 4:30 p.m., then released for the day unless an overnighter was on the training schedule. Promotions were contingent on passing the Army physical fitness test, as well as a bunch of other random qualifications such as military schools, professional development, military awards and decorations, rifle qualification, civilian training and/or schooling and college degrees. The APFT consisted of 3 events: push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. It has since been changed, but that was what it was when I was in. I'm a natural runner. I ran track in high school. Tall and lean with good stamina. Not too fast, but I was steady. 6-minute miles all day long. Sit-ups were never a problem for me. Push-ups, however, not much for upper body strength. I've always struggled with push-ups. It's the only event of the APFT that I ever actively trained. I could max out the other 2 events, but push-ups, I was happy if I could make the minimum required to pass the test. I was up for promotion. I trained push-ups for months prior to the test. On the day of the test, one of the smokers in the unit wanted to run with me, to pace off me so he could pass the PT test. I did the number of required push-ups to pass that event and I was flying high, knowing the other 2 events were easy for me. We ran on a quarter-mile high school track, 8 laps for 2 miles, and as we passed our scorer, in this case the idiot first lieutenant, we'd yell out our last name and he'd check off the completed lap. My buddy and I ran side by side for all 8 laps, and when we got to the last lap, the LT said I had another one to do. We explained that we ran together for all 8 laps, and if one of us passed, both of us passed, but he wasn't buying. He made a mistake and couldn't admit it. He was adamant that I had run another lap, and because I was running slower than I normally would have to let the smoker keep up, I couldn't complete another lap in the time required to pass the test. I was marked as a PT failure, and wasn't eligible for promotion. Because I was an NCO, there wasn't that many slots that opened up in a year in my job classification. The opening went to another NCO farther down the promotion list than me. I was Pete. My civilian job was in manufacturing. We worked a 3-on, 3-off schedule. I worked nights. Weekends were our big money weeks. In order to attend a drill weekend, I'd have to miss work Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday night. I would lose about $600 for attending drill. Occasionally, we could be approved for missing drill as long as we made it up during that month. Or we could just take no pay for drill and miss those days towards creditable retirement. At some point, leadership decided that all PT failures would take a PT test every month until they passed. Failure to show up for the PT test would be an automatic forfeiture of pay and retirement point. Eligibility for retirement was based on having a good year. A good year was 50 points. Each UTA was 1 point. Annual training was 15 points, leaving 35 points needed from drill weekends. In a year, I could miss 3 drill weekends, and as long as I made all the rest, I was eligible for a good year. I saved those excused drills for the weeks I was scheduled to work Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so I wouldn't lose a $600 difference from my civilian job and drill pay. Now, back to those mandatory PT tests every weekend. Leadership decided that we couldn't miss the scheduled training, so the PT test would be held before drill, at 5:30 a.m. at an armory 30 miles farther away from my unit's armory. To be at the PT test armory on time for the rest meant that I had to get up at 3:30 a.m., get dressed, drive almost 2 hours, then do the test. Cue malicious compliance. If I was going to be inconvenienced by this idiocy, so is my scorer. I would show up for the test, sign in, do 1 push-up, 1 sit-up, 1 lap, and call it good. Drive to my unit and report that I failed the PT test, and go to work and still get paid, every month. My first sergeant pulled me aside one day and asked what was going on. He said he knew I could pass the test. I explained that I already passed the test, but that the lieutenant never passed kindergarten counting. If they wanted to hold the PT test during duty hours, I'd be more than happy to try to pass. But there was zero incentive for me to do so as long as I had to drive 2 hours to take the test at 5:30 a.m. Another drill weekend, it snows quite a bit, and it slows my drive down so I get to the PT test a few minutes after it started. The LT in charge said it was too late and I couldn't start now. Okay, whatever, drive to my unit to report that I wasn't allowed to take the test. Then I'm informed I'm getting an unsat for refusing to do the PT test, and wouldn't be paid for that UTA. Okay, if I'm not being paid, I'm leaving and will be back in 4 hours. Nope, if you leave, you'll get another unsat. I realized then that means I don't have a good year. I'll only have 49 points. F it, I quit then. I had over 18 years in, re-enlisted for 6 more right before the failed PT test I passed, and I just walked away. I had over 18 years in, re-enlisted for 6 more right before the failed PT test I passed, and I just walked away. No more stupid chicken SH and no more losing money. In years past, some National Guard units were known to carry soldiers on their rolls. The unit would report that the soldiers were present for duty when they were not, and unit administrators would pocket their pay, or create company slush funds. Sometimes those soldiers were almost ready to collect pensions and were kicked out, and the state saved those pension payments. Now after 18 years, soldiers are locked in, and units are unable to discharge them. You can quit like I did and ask for a discharge, and the National Guard Bureau will kick it back, denying it like they did me. I still had 4 years on my current enlistment. They wouldn't and couldn't release me. Meanwhile, the State National Guard Bureau would get a report of soldiers not showing up for drill. My name kept appearing. Uncomfortable questions were asked why someone with all this time in at my rank would just walk away. My situation became an embarrassment for the state. How are they going to get my name off this report every month? Why did this happen? How did we fail a soldier with 1 year left until retirement eligibility? A friend of mine was a senior NCO, and in one of these meetings he raised his hand and volunteered a way to get me off this list and not do anything illegal or fraudulent. I was transferred to his unit. I attended drill at this unit, just a few miles from my house on my days off, during the week, and reported to him. All I needed was 50 points and that would give me a good year, and I could retire with my 20 years in. I could also do military correspondence courses for retirement points, which wasn't available when I quit. When I attended enough UTAs and completed the courses, I got my 50 points. I received my eligibility for retirement letter and promised my friend he could have half. Unfortunately, my friend passed away at age 55 a year or so after he finally retired after 30 plus years in uniform. At his funeral, another retired senior NCO spoke and reflected on my friend's ability to think outside the box and referenced my situation. Yes, I'm happily collecting my pension, but I'll never forget him and what he did for me. The second story is, that won't fix the customer's problem, but it will certainly fix mine. Back in the dawn of smartphones, I was doing consumer tech support for a wireless carrier. My scope was internet functions on your phone like web browsing, email, and some in-house apps. One of those apps was a third-party corporate syncing solution I'll call CorpTech. CorpTech had a bunch of features in addition to the standard email and contacts syncing, which boiled down to administration stuff like restricting web browse and text messaging, forcing a password for unlock, etc. All of this was almost exclusively supported by CorpTech themselves, and my senior reps had the only escalation path. So one day I had a guy who was an in-house administrator for a company and was having problems with CorpTech. As soon as he joined the device, the CorpTech system's web browsing would fail. My options were limited. Since I couldn't see his CorpTech server config, we focused on the device. We master reset the device and everything worked. This meant the device and wireless network were working. The problem is outside of my scope. Cool. I reached out for assistance from a senior rep, and unfortunately I got a guy who we'll call Dwayne, because that was his name, and I still hate him 10 plus years after leaving that job. Dwayne was in another part of the country in a call center that was frequently viewed as an incompetent set of morons. I had a section of my cubicle wall dedicated to receipts from the local bar labeled Call Center B Inspired Drinking. Additionally, he was the sort of guy who was more interested in rules and regulations, as opposed to his job. I suspect he was promoted so he wouldn't be talking to customers anymore, but I digress. I tell Dwayne we need to escalate the CorpTech support team. He put the brakes on that and insisted on troubleshooting further. Fortunately, the caller was cool, and we repeated the steps all while keeping Dwayne updated in chat. Dwayne insisted that if CorpTech synced, it meant the phone's internet connection was good. I agreed and suggested it was a CorpTech setting blocking web browse, hence my wanting to escalate them. Dwayne insisted it wasn't that, and has me tell the customer to master reset again. I ask what we should do if it doesn't work. He says it's a bad device and to exchange it. I'm a little taken aback. It can't be a bad device since it works perfectly outside of CorpTech's influence, but sure, I'll swap out the device. I talk to the caller and say I'm being instructed to exchange his phone, but he may want to look further into his CorpTech server settings. He understands. I save the chat transcript with Dwayne. I'm friendly with the senior reps in my building, so I print out the transcript and wander over on my break. I hand it to one of them and suggest they take a look at it. Her eyes got really wide as she skimmed it, and she asked if she could give it to her boss, the head of all the senior reps. I smiled and said sure, I can print another copy. It turns out this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Dwayne was fired not long after. The last story is: complain about not getting free hits even though you had the advantage? You just cost your team a place in the grand final. Context: I'm a field hockey umpire. Generally, if someone has been fouled but they're unable to retain possession or have a chance to score a goal, I'm allowed to call a play on if there is sufficient advantage. Story: I was umpiring a semi-final. There was a certain person we'll call Bob who would constantly complain that he was getting fouled all the time. Bob was a very good player, so the opposition would always gang up on him when he had the ball. Because he was very skilled, a lot of the time when he was fouled, he was able to dribble past the opposition and get the ball into his attacking area, or be able to have a shot on goal. As I already mentioned, Bob was a complainer. He'd constantly cry about the free hits he should have been awarded while completely disregarding the fact that he had gained the advantage and even scored a goal, when I let play go on after he was fouled. At halftime, his team were losing 2-1. Bob comes up to me and starts ranting about how useless my umpiring is and that I missed lots of fouls on him. I assured him that I saw those fouls, but I let play go on and that he gained sufficient advantage, so I was confused as to why he was complaining. He then said, "You have to call every foul." I said, "Okay, I'll make sure that I call every foul." Malicious compliance mode activated. During the second half, I made sure that I called every foul for Bob's team, regardless if they had the advantage or not. They then had to bring the ball back to the spot of the foul, meaning it gave the opposition time to get back and organize their defense. His teammates were getting very frustrated, but he was content knowing that he had got his way, until there was about 3 minutes left in the game. Bob had the ball at the top of the circle. He was about to have a shot on goal when the opposition fouled him. When his stick was swung back, I blew my whistle as quickly as I could. Then half a second later, he hit the ball and it goes sailing into the net. Because I had already blown my whistle, I had stopped play and the goal was not allowed. Bob was irate. He comes storming towards me yelling, "Why didn't you play the advantage?" I replied, "You said that I had to call every foul, and that's exactly what I've been doing this entire second half. That was a foul, so I called it." Bob continues ranting and starts cussing, so I told him that I wasn't tolerating his dissent and gave him a yellow card. 5-minute suspension, meaning he was going to miss out on the last few minutes of the game. His team were still losing 2-1. If I had let the advantage play, the score would have been 2-2, and the game might have gone into extra time, meaning that his team would have had a chance to win and take part in next week's grand final. But because I maliciously complied with his request and Bob's team were down to 10 men, he had to sit and watch his team lose the game, and their place in the grand final, all because he wouldn't let me play advantage. Edit: just to clarify, it's not part of the rules that I have to play advantage. It's just something I do to keep the game flowing. If someone doesn't want me to play advantage, I'm able to oblige. I didn't know that Bob was going to score with that shot on goal. I was blowing my whistle quickly to all fouls, and unfortunately for him, that shot ended up going in the net. I hope you enjoyed these stories. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Have a good day.